Hello, everyone, and welcome to Christian Fiction Fans. We are here with Nicole Deese talking about her book, Before I Called You Mine. So, let me tell you a little bit about Nicole, and then we'll get to hear from her. She is a Christie and Carol Award-winning best-selling author of hope-filled, humorous, and heartfelt contemporary romance novels. When she's not sorting out character arcs and story plots of her own, she can usually be found listening to an audiobook and multitasking at least four different chores at once. She's a hoarder of sparkling water, a lover of long walks and even longer talks with friends, and a seeker of fun and adventure at all times. She lives in small town Idaho with her happily ever after hubby, two freakishly tall teenage sons, and one princess daughter with the heart of a warrior. I can so relate because I actually have four freakishly tall sons and one
Okay.
daughter, so I can totally relate to that. So, welcome, Nicole. We're so happy you're here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So, I was hoping you could just start by telling us your um, uh, journey to becoming an author. Like, is this something you always wanted, or it just you happened upon it? Tell us how you arrived at authorhood.
Yeah, so I always say that I didn't know I was going to be an author, but I always loved being a storyteller, and I kind of just, naturally told stories. And my parents were always, they always teased that I was the storyteller when they had friends over or whatever, And so I think that I loved story from a young age, and I think God gives us those sensitivities, early on that kind of lead to something. And little seedlings that he sprinkles, throughout the years. And then I was a voracious reader. I loved books from about sixth grade on. I did not come from a reading family. My parents never ever read novels, but I really found that love like around my middle school years, and just was a voracious reader. And I think that eventually, when I got married and had, young kids at home, we actually moved from Oregon, where we had my husband and I actually both grew up not far from each other. We went to the same church. And so we both had tons of family and community and friends in our church community and all that. And then through a job opportunity, moved to Texas, and we knew nobody. And so it was in that season that I became really close with the librarian, and just was there all the time and was reading all the time. And honestly, the story just kind of goes that one day I had finished a series that I loved reading, and I kind of put the book down and looked at my husband, and I said, I think I could do this. And he said, do what? And I said, like, write a book. And he's like, cool. And that was kind of this, like, the very anticlimactic moment of how Nicole, tried to become an author. But yeah, there was lots of things that happened after that. And honestly, the hand of God, kind of opening doors and clearing paths, and putting me kind of in front of the right people at the right time. And yeah, that's kind of how it started. I wrote just from my heart. I wrote from a reader's perspective, like, what did I want to read? That's kind of how I wrote. I hope that's still how I write. And yeah, I just kind of, I thought with my first book that it would probably just be my mom who read it, and possibly, she's not even a big reader, but my mom, and then one of my best friends. And then the Lord really, opened a door, and actually it got into the hands of an editor through not my own way. And she gave me a ton of, really valuable advice, and really spoke life into this dream that I didn't know would become a future career. So that's how it began. Yeah.
Oh, so that first book, was it ever published?
Yeah. So I actually independently published my first three novels. And again, didn't just knew what I knew as a reader, never read one writing craft book, apart from like one semi decent class in college, which was a creative writing class. I, had
Yeah.
never taken any kind of writing, professional writing, course or anything. And so, But yeah, and then through those first three books, actually a publisher ended up calling me and I got an agent, and really there was just a lot of very promising affirmation that the Lord, gave. And I always say, like, I didn't have a lot of early on rejection. And I actually think maybe that was because the Lord knew I would have just quit after the first one. Like, I don't actually think that's like a super positive, about my character, I guess. But yeah, he really opened doors. And then, I just tried to be obedient and follow. And so
Yeah.
that's led me
Yeah.
where I am. Yeah.
I love that. So tell us a little bit about your decision to indie publish that first book, because there's two different paths you can take. And indie is a lot of work, but querying and finding an agent is also a lot of work. Did you feel
Yeah.
like that was just the right path for you, or how did you make that decision?
At the time, so this was like early, let's see, I think 2012. So the marketplace was so different. There was very, very few indie period.
Yeah.
Like the independent publishing world had literally just opened, like maybe months, maybe not even a full year before, we published this way. And I say we because my husband was the one pushing me to do it this way. Um, and I just didn't know anything about publishing. I had spoken to one editor, and that was like, I don't, that's such a long story, so I won't go into that. But and that was just kind of very, very like the most random scenario that you can think of, how I talked to her. And so, and she was actually in nonfiction, but she really gave great advice and just told me, like, go to a conference when you can afford it one day. And so we, my husband and I kind of brainstormed, and he's in the tech world, and just yeah, he sees tech advancing all the time. Like, that's what he does. He's in cybersecurity, and so he was like, I've just been reading about this whole indie publishing thing. Like, why don't we just try this? And I was like, okay. There was a lot of just like, okay, in those days. But yeah, so I mean, there was just so many things that, like, I would probably do very differently. I would do very differently now. But I will say that being both indie published and traditionally published through a different, I've been published through a couple different publishers now. Both are equally hard. They are hard work. It's hard work to write a story. It's hard work to edit a story. It's hard work to finalize and polish a story. It's just different. It's like choose your hard, choose your
Yeah.
hard. And so this was just the way that it happened for me. And those years were valuable, and I learned a lot. And like I said, God had a path for those books. And even though they're actually still up, and I never ever talk about them, and but I feel like, they were humble beginnings. And every time I want to take them down, I feel like the Lord's like, why are you doing that? Is it my pride? Probably, so I leave them up. But yeah, the Lord used those things. And I think he takes, it was like, this was the best of what I had at the time. And the Lord, is honored by that. And so I always tell people, like, I don't think one is necessarily better than the other. I'm actually in the process right now of ending another book, and that's just because it's my choice. I want to do it that way. And so,
Yeah.
there's advantages to both. And I think as long as you're pursuing excellence in indie the same way that you would pursue excellence in traditional, then you're going to have an awesome product at the end that you can be proud of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So you said your first three books were indie published. How many have you published altogether at this point?
I think that I have 17 that are
Okay.
published, 16 or 17. Yeah, one of those.
And then where does Before I Called You Mine fall in the lineup?
I think like right around book 10. I think it
Okay.
hit right around there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of right in the middle-ish.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Neat.
And definitely kind of came right in the middle of a big transition season, in our lives, in our families' lives. And I wasn't even sure if I was going to continue writing, because that was right when we were adopting our daughter.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get back to that adoption story in a minute, but tell us, how long did it take you to write that first book? Because a first book's a big learning curve, and then this, before I called you mine, how, or maybe what's your average now? How long does it take you to write a book?
Oh gosh. So I would love to say that like the first one took me so long and now I'm like so fast, but it's actually the opposite. I feel like the first one was like I'm just, I just like wrote to,
Right.
my heart's content and I would I would write during nap time and I would write during night, into the night and I would just write. And and I just didn't know what I didn't know, and then I
Yes.
learned a lot of stuff. And now, so now I'm so slow, I feel like. But I don't know. I probably wrote, those first books in a matter of a few months. I would say 4 or 5 months, maybe. I can't quite remember. Now it really takes me closer to probably 7 or 8 months for a first draft. And then, of
Okay.
course, a lot of work that goes into the editing side of things, too. So, yeah,
Yeah.
like really like a year's like close to a year for probably the full process. Yeah.
And even though you wrote those first books faster, did it take you longer in the editing side of it, or was it still you just didn't know what you didn't know, and so
Oh no, editing. I was like, what's editing? Those
yeah,
first books, I was like, do I have the right commas in? Like I didn't quite understand. Like
yeah,
now I'm like, oh, this entire second half needs to, go this whole different journey. Like then I was just like happy go lucky, it
yeah,
was like different scenario.
yes, yeah, for sure. So this book won an award. Many of your books have won awards, but this particular one, the KIP Reader's Choice Award. Tell us about that word. I've not heard of it before.
Yeah, I actually don't even know where it originated, but it was a Reader's Choice Award that was on Goodreads and
Okay.
kind of advertised lots of different places. And yeah, I mean, it was a really, it was an honor because it was not, from industry professionals. It was literally just readers who had
Yeah.
the entire category of, I think, Christian contemporary romance and yeah, and this one was voted up and then it ended up winning. So it was pretty neat.
So it wasn't even something you submitted for necessarily. It was just
No,
all readers.
no. Yeah,
Wow, that's
readers
really
like did the whole
huge.
thing. So yeah, it was like it was a surprise to me when it was like, oh, this is in the top, I think it was like in the top three, and I was like, what? So yeah, it was pretty neat.
Yeah, well, congratulations. That's really exciting. I
Yeah.
mean, I think all of us here, we have it on the Fable app too, and I've been just seeing lots of comments about people and how much they loved this book. So
Oh, that's neat.
it's a nice book. So let's talk about your daughter that you adopted, and we try to keep the book part of it spoiler free, but I'm thinking those of us who read the book might notice some similarities in your adoption story and the book. So tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so let's see. We adopted Lucy in 2017, July of 2017, and started. I always say, when we got married, my husband Tim and I got married, we, had a heart for adoption. We had talked about adopting a child one day, didn't know how that was going to fit into the plans or anything like that. But we had two biological sons and then we actually thought we would go the route of foster care. And then my younger sister actually passed away suddenly in a car accident. And so that kind of halted that whole process. That was in 2013. And so, we had like gone through all these classes and done all of this training, and we're literally at the point of getting like a sign off for like the lady that comes and checks the house out, kind of like the final thing for the home study. And then my sister passed away, and so that stopped everything. And actually, there's I don't know if it's a law, but it's definitely when you have something like that happen in a family, they actually stop the process for a year. They don't let you continue on, and so life's going on at this point. My and actually those three books that I wrote, are getting a lot of traction, and I get a phone call from a publisher that wants a different book. And so kind of things start to go an entirely different direction over the next few years. And my husband and I both kind of feel like this is God's hand. Um, and like maybe he's just closing that door, like maybe we were just like open to it, and now it's not where we're headed. And anyways, a few years go by and we moved to Idaho, and my husband actually brings it up in conversation on our anniversary, and he's like talking about stewardship, and I'm thinking that he's talking about like wanting to donate money somewhere, or like a charity he wants to look at. I have no idea. And then he's like, brings up adoption again. I was like, whoa, what? Like this is a different conversation that I thought we were having. And so honestly, I call those my Jonah months. I really like kind of ran from the idea for 6 months, and the Lord in his kindness pursued me. And so we started the process. We always knew that we would go through Holt International, which is in our hometown in Oregon. And so, yeah, it actually went. So, what we learned, and what kind of comes up in the story, because I was not thinking, so like the thing that I had to reconcile when we were saying yes to adoption is I already knew, because of the previous work that we had done, the conferences, the meetings, the home study, like the books that we'd read, I already knew that this was going to require 100%. This was not, you don't adopt a child as a hobby or like a
Yeah.
side gig, like this
Yeah.
was going to be like 100% focus. And so I knew that that was going to mean I needed to take either a break or, really be good with not writing anymore. I didn't know, and there's so many unknowns when you adopt. Like you think you're getting one thing, you get something else, and in terms of like what you're saying yes to, right? And so I really knew that the call for me was to be willing to kind of lay down this dream that I felt like God gave me, and so that was really difficult, but I said yes to that. Um, and so we started to pursue adoption. The agency that we went with actually was like, hey, we think that you should look into China, like, and had a list of reasons why I can't even remember, but like this was like where they were kind of leading us toward. Um, and in that process of like so much paperwork and, all of it, the one of the interesting things was when I got to that part about, whatever your marital status is, no matter if this process takes 3 years or 1 year or whatever it is, you have to be that in that same place, like whether it's singleness or whether it's married or whatever. And I always thought that was so interesting, and then, fast forward a long time, like fast forward probably 10 months when we go to actually fly to pick up our daughter. And we had only pictures and videos and one semi FaceTime type call, which was interesting, through an interpreter. And that was it. Like that's how we knew her. She did not know us. She did not understand adoption. She was in more of a, almost like a foster home. That she had never seen adoption. No child had ever been adopted out of
Wow.
this orphanage, which was neat in itself. That's a whole nother God story. We were told we would never get a child. I felt like the Lord had put on our hearts a 6-year-old girl. I don't know why. Like that's always what I saw when I prayed. And they said, "There's no way. Like the only way you're getting a 6-year-old is a 6-year-old daughter is if you're open to very, very severe special needs and have to have special medical certifications for that, or if they take on a new partnership with a new area where there would be an orphanage." And she's like, and that never happens. Well, 1 week later, I see an email and there's 4 boys and one girl, and that's Lucy. And so, anyway, so that was like crazy, right? So we fly there, and it's while we're there where we have to be there for 3 weeks. It's a big, big process, we meet her. Parts in the story are very accurate to our moments with the backpack and the stuff, and is actually a pretty very, all of it is special, even the hard stuff is special looking back. But um yeah, so we get there. And so part of that time in China is everyone that's adopting in all of China always ends up in Guangzhou, which is where the embassy is and where you get your child gets their U.S. passport. You sign in all that kind of stuff. And while you're there, you meet a bunch of other families that are adopting at the same time. You go to dinner with them. We're all kind of stuck in the same, this transition for about a week. And it's there that I see and meet this single mom, and my mind kind of starts to go a little bit, even though I'm like not writing, I'm not on contract. I'm thinking that the Lord is telling me that, I'm not writing a book again. But then it's, yeah, when I come home and I just like keep thinking and thinking and thinking about this story idea. And that's kind of eventually, I was like, wow, that would really make quite the conflict in a book, right? Is if you meet
Yeah.
someone at the same time and you're already in process for this big thing. And so that's kind of how the story originated. And but yeah, so Lucy is now, we adopted her at just before she turned 7. She was 6 and little over 6, and now she is 15, and just one of the brightest lights in my life, and my little best friend. I was just with her a few minutes ago. She's at church right now. And yeah, I mean, absolutely have watched God do an amazing thing, and so thankful that we said yes. So thankful for the gift of adoption. So thankful for God's redemption plan. Yeah.
Yeah, what a neat story. Thank you for sharing that. In the book, you talk a lot about that transition of that first year and attachment issues. And for myself, who has not really been touched by adoption, this is all new territory. So, can you share a little bit about what that first year was like for you and your daughter, especially a 6-year-old who is very verbal, but not in English? I'm sure that was
Right.
a huge
No. Yeah.
challenge. Like, how
Yeah.
did that go?
Yeah. Well, it's wild. Yeah. So she did not know one English word. We spoke the first couple of months through Google Translate, using our phones,
Yeah.
passing back and forth. But it's really wild, because she was so young. She was truly fluent in English by 6 months. Like it was just
Wow.
um, so their little brains, are just these
Yes.
amazing sponges. And she just could not wait to just like know everything she needed to know and communicate with her brothers and communicate with her peers at school. And what was the question? What am I supposed to ask? I got off track.
Like about attachment and
Oh,
how
attachment.
that, yeah,
Yeah. So honestly, ours, I mean, I think that every single family, it's going to look different because every single
yeah,
child is different, right? Every single home is different. The needs are different. You prepare for everything that you can possibly prepare for. And there's a lot of great reading material and tips out there. But yeah, Lucy actually did. We prepared for probably a much more difficult situation than what we experienced personally. But yeah, she attached very well to me first, and then to my husband. And and it's a big, there's a curve to that. I mean, I love that one of the Karen Purvis, who's one of the big teachers on, now she has passed away, but one of the big teachers on a book called The Connected Child, and she ran, so many different curriculums and conferences and things. But they would always say, when you have a biological baby, you are saying yes to that baby non-verbally 1,000 times in their first year, and every time that you meet a felt need, that connection grows, that attachment
yeah,
grows. And so when you adopt a child, I am adopting a 6.5-year-old, not a baby, and so it's like you're looking for ways to say all the time, I hear you, I see you, I will meet this need, I will, you know, um, I will comfort you when you're sad. Like I can be trusted. And so that's really what attachment is. It's these building blocks that you're kind of starting at a later age, and with different people, right? And but yet, for us, that, and for our daughter, like the Lord really, met us where we are, and yeah, she's doing really well. So,
It's
and first year
amazing. Yeah.
first year is
Well,
hard, but it's like, what, I've had two biological kids, and each of them have had a hard year, right? So it's kind of
right,
like, again, kids, parenting,
right.
it's all hard.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. But I can imagine as a 6.5-year-old, it's traumatic, and our culture
oh,
is so
very,
different from
yeah,
China, and to leave
yeah,
everything that you
everything,
know.
every
And
smell. Just think about the different smells,
yes,
like down to like every smell, every store. Like, she'd never been in a store, she'd never been in a car,
wow.
like there was lots and lots and lots of change. But yeah, it was a pretty incredible process looking back. Yeah.
Hmm. Does she still speak any Chinese?
Very little. She's actually starting to want to try
Yeah,
again. We had her in Chinese lessons for the first 2 years that we adopted her, and she just was not into it, did not
yeah,
want to do that. Um, and that's it, at some level, it needs to be her choice, and there's lots of
sure.
personal reasons surrounding that. And so, but just recently, she's like, I think I might want to try to learn again. I was like, I think that's a great idea. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I bet it will come back very quickly.
yeah, we hope. I always tell her that, so we'll
Yeah,
see.
yeah. Neat. What a very cool story. Thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
So I guess you talked a little bit about why a single first grade teacher as the main character. It was spurred by meeting a single mom adopting there. And
Yeah.
and did you have a reason for choosing a first grade teacher?
I was in Lucy's class a lot. So she went to this little Christian school that met in our church. And so I was there, just kind of seeing the kids and seeing the classroom, and just kind of experiencing that world quite a bit. And it just felt like this would be the job, right? Like, you need to create an environment where you have a main character who already has a heart for children and
Yeah.
understands them at
Hmm.
really a deeper, even a deeper emotional level than I think kind of the average, woman,
Yeah.
and so I really wanted to, even just have a little bit of education there for her to, dealing with so many different types of kids and needs, and whatever, and to really show like she wasn't just some kind of woman who was like, I think that this sounds like a neat thing to do, but like had some kind of background and history,
Yeah.
to adoption.
Yeah. And so you said you kind of shelved the idea of writing when you decided to adopt. At what point did you pick it back up and start? And this was the story you started with, correct?
Yeah. So let's see. I was probably home with Lucy like maybe 3 months or so. And I still had, a really strong writing community, and friendships and things. And it was just kind of like I was finding myself kind of daydreaming about different aspects of the story. And I think a lot of writers feel like one of the ways that we even, figure out what we're thinking and feeling often is through our words and through writing that way. Like, I would 1,000% want to write a story, like, sit down and write someone else's story rather than like just sit down and like try to think about what's actually like going on in my own head and my own heart. Like, so it's like, it's kind of this like deflective, very safe way of like trying to deal with some of the thoughts that I'm having, right? And feelings I'm having. And then it's also fun because it's this, this, creative outlet that, God's given me. And so, yeah, I kind of just started dabbling with these ideas and this conflict that, originated from our time. And I called Connie Cassette. I don't know if you guys have read her. Connelly Cassette is a biblical fiction author, and she's one of my dearest friends. And so one night I called her and I'm like, I'm thinking about this story idea. And she was like, Nicole, you should write that. Like, just write it for you. Just write it for you. And so I did. I actually called my agent originally, and she was like, that will never sell. No one will ever buy a book about adoption. No one will ever buy a book about international adoption. And so it was kind of like the pressure was off. Like I was like, then I'll just write it for me. And so I ended up writing. I was almost done with it. And it was kind of like the joy of writing came back to like just like that very first book. Like I didn't have to think about anyone else. I didn't have to think about what would a publisher want or not want. I just wrote the story that was on my heart, the way that it was on my heart. And honestly, to this day, it's the least amount of editing that I've had to do on any published work that I've ever had. Like I just wrote the story that was there to write. And then one day I get an email from a publisher of Bethany House. And then my agent calls very soon after, and she's like, I just got another big publisher, I won't name them, that are asking about you, and they're wanting to know if you're going to this event. And I wasn't planning on it, but they're like, they both, at different times want to sit down and ask what you're working on. And I was like, well, this is what I have, and which is kind of funny because it was the same agent that was like, this will never sell. So I met with both of them. I ended up flying there for this conference. I met with both of them, and they both made offers. And it was really, and they actually it's my only bidding war that I've ever had on a book. And they both outbid each other, bid, bid, bid. And it was like weeks. It was crazy. And but it was such a moment of God's faithfulness that I will never forget in my life, because just like Lauren in the story, and this is why I wrote it this way, I thought that God was asking me to give up writing. I thought that was the obedience to this other call. And really, Lord's like, actually, you're going to adopt, and you're going to write, and you're going to sell a book about adoption. I'm going to go ahead and marry both those things. And
Yeah.
so it really was such a moment of just joy, and just feeling so seen and loved, by the Lord. And like, that's what faithfulness looks like, God's faithfulness to us when he asks us something hard. And so yes, that was the journey.
That's amazing. What a great story. So let's talk a little bit about Joshua. This brilliant, quirky, he's just like the perfect guy. How did his character come to you?
So I was talking to Connie again on the phone,
Uh-huh.
and I remember this phone call so well. So I love answering this question because I was trying to figure, I could hear her. I knew I would say like I could hear her. Like I understood who Lauren would be.
Yeah.
But I was like trying to figure out like who this guy would be. And I remember walking out on my deck talking to Connie and saying, he has to be some kind of like substitute that like comes into the school, because he like they have their paths have to cross, but I don't
Right.
necessarily want to make him a teacher. And so all of a sudden we started talking about goofy things that could be a part of his personality. Like he has to be really lovable right from the start. And right about that time, those shirts with the dinosaur that you pull over and you see the head were coming out. And we just belly laughed. I mean, there was like minutes of time on that phone call where we were not speaking because we were laughing so hard at this concept of these shirts and this, you know, just this guy that just had no care in the world to just like be his, most humorous self, and just, free from inhibitions, like free from fear of man, all that stuff. And so really it was kind of, so she sends me a picture of one of those shirts with the
Yeah.
dinosaur on it. And I was like, that's him. That's who
That's the
he is.
guy.
And so really that was kind of the impetus, the beginnings of who Joshua would become. And yeah. And then I kind of was like, oh, I hear him now. I understand who he's going to be. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so fun. In the story, you also talk about Lauren has a lot of mentors and supporters that help her through her adoption. Tell us a little bit about some of those people in your life that helped you through your process.
Yeah. So I am fortunate to have a few good friends who have gone through adoptions. We were a part of, like online groups there. I reached out to some people actually in my town here who had adopted from China specifically a few times. And then, yeah, I had a really dear older mentor that was kind of like Gail in the book. Although in my real life, this woman had not adopted, but she just was still such a voice of wisdom and care and love, and just was always, willing to say the hard things and the good things, right? Like both. Like you need someone that will speak the truth in love. And so I feel like the Lord really gave me us both such an amazing community. And our small group was a huge part of Lucy's adoption, and willing to pray for us, willing to partner with us, give to us financially. Like there was just a lot of prayer, and support, connection.
Wonderful. So, for people who have not gone through adoption and maybe know someone who's going through adoption, what would be your suggestion on how others can support someone in that situation?
I think ask a lot of questions. I think that even if you are familiar with having your own kids and or babysitting or nannying or being the best aunt in the world, like adoption really is its own thing. And I think that sometimes we can over advise, but and it's out of the right heart and it's out of love and all of those things. But there really are some very specific things to adoption. So I always tell people, like, there's books, like if you are close to somebody who is wanting to take on this journey, ask what they're reading, ask if you could read something, ask if you could, um, sit with them to understand, ask questions, and, see if they have a conference that, that you can go with them to, or, you know, um, I love the idea. Like we bought several copies of Karen Purvis's book, The Connected Child, and we gave those out to some family members just to say, here's some of our this best that we've read, and we would love for you to partner with us in these techniques and these concepts. And because it is different, at that point we had, um, an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old at home. Like we knew about, at some level raising a kid, but
Yeah.
we also knew this was going to be really different. And so, I think just being open to being curious, staying curious, even if you've raised 12 children of your own, like again, just being open to the idea that there might be some differences, and ask how you can support.
Yeah. I loved in the book how it just showed sometimes it's the very little things like the folding of the laundry
Yeah,
and bringing groceries and dinner and sometimes we think we have to make a grand gesture, but something as small as folding laundry is a grand gesture, even though
absolutely.
it doesn't seem like you're doing anything big. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I think, even not in an adoption setting, but we can all look around us to neighbors and friends and look
Mhm.
for those opportunities to just do the little thing that makes an impact and makes people feel loved too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I love that. You also in the book mention the red thread, and there's a red thread on the cover. Tell us a little bit about this. I don't know if it's a Chinese something or another.
Yeah, I don't know if I can remember like how it all originated, but basically just this idea that, you know, there's connection, on either end of that, no matter where you are, and that the red thread is there or something. And so a lot of times in adoption world, you give bracelets, that kind
Mhm.
of and so, and the ladybug is another kind of like symbol for adoption. And so
Yep.
for Lucy specifically, we had these bracelets made when before we got to China, and from a Chinese lady there, and so she shipped them to us. And so Lucy had one, and basically it's just like if it's a bracelet, like it's infinite, right? Like it's this circular, concept of like there's not a beginning or an end, and and we can look at that like Christ's love for us, and so we loved that idea. So my husband and I both wore one the day that we adopted her, saw her for the first time and picked her up from the orphanage, and then we put one on Lucy too. So we still have all of those today. So it's just kind of a sweet symbol.
Yeah, I love that. That's sweet. So you've talked a little bit about your faith. How does it influence your writing as you're writing a book? How does your faith come into it?
I mean, I hope that it's just a part of who I am. It's not a separate piece of me. It
Yeah,
is me, right? And so, I think that it's in, worldview. It's in, even if I have some books that have maybe more of an overt faith thread, and then I have books that maybe have more of just they're coming more from like a Christian worldview, where there's not some big conversion. There's probably, I don't even know if I have a conversion in any of my books, but there's not some big aha, Jesus moment, that comes in. But I hope that it's through like my whole goal, even in writing romance, is just to communicate the heart of God. He the whole Bible is a love story that is written, from him to us, right? This wooing of our hearts to him. And, so it's like, wow, if I can show the contrast between the world's view of romantic love and God's view of romantic love and how he designed it to be and why he designed it to be, like, that's kind of my first mission with this romance genre.
yeah,
So
that's beautiful. Well, I want to make sure others have a chance to ask any questions. So if you have a question or a comment for Nicole, feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. And Kirsten, I knew you were going to have something to
You
say.
knew I was, yes. I'm sitting here bouncing up and down. Um, I loved it. I loved everything. I've read some of your other stories, and so I actually, as crazy as it says, I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't read the
yeah,
trailer
that cover.
in the back
Yeah.
of the book. And I'm an adoptive mom. So I was like, oh my
Oh,
gosh, this is so great. And I started out in international adoption because I didn't want a birth mom to change her mind. And we
sure.
were with Russia and they closed their doors. I'm like, a country
Mhm.
can change its mind. So
Absolutely.
both of
Yeah.
our daughters, or our I have two biological sons and two adopted daughters, and um, they were born here in the States.
Okay.
Um, but I could relate. Like I was like, this lady knows she's got to be. I didn't look do any research after.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was like, she's got to be an adoptive mom because this is so true. Like like
Yeah.
sometimes you read stories, adoption stories, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. Like
Right.
it's
This is
it's
not
like,
it.
no,
Yeah.
this is not good. This is putting the wrong picture of what it looks like, or
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and
You're
and
right.
it's a touchy subject. And I loved how her friends surrounded her. I loved how everybody just supported her, but there were like her family and everything like that. There's always those people that are
Mhm.
like, what are you thinking? And you're like, I
Yeah.
didn't ask your opinion.
Yeah.
you
No.
know
No.
um
Yeah.
and
Don't need.
so yeah, and I'm sure that I totally know Karen Purvis and the Connected Child and took
Yeah.
TBR and the
Yeah.
whole work.
Yeah.
So I just,
Awesome.
I mean, you did a great job. It was
Thank you.
fantastic, and I wasn't expecting it, and what a treat. And I actually, it's
Oh.
funny, I just had like a little God moment. Just had a friend meet me for lunch last week and said, we feel like we're being called to adopt. I'm like, well, I just finished this great audiobook. You should listen to
Oh,
it.
awesome.
So I
Thank
do think,
you.
just hearing it, like, and I love to the way that you share Jesus without preaching.
Mm.
It is it's there's so many great Christian fiction authors. But in all the books that I've read, it's just kind of like getting the salt right in a recipe. You have it,
Yeah.
you put the right amount in, it
Yeah.
tastes really good. I feel it. I know I'm in a Christian book, but I'm not like, it's a book that I would share with someone that's
Right.
not a strong faith-filled person, but might
Right.
get a little dabble.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't have any
Yeah.
questions. I'm just like love your books and was so
Oh,
excited. I'm like,
thank
I
you
gotta
so
get
much.
online. My daughter's downstairs, like, do this puzzle with me. I'm like, I'm sorry, I gotta go. I'll be back in a few minutes.
Yes.
So,
Oh, well, thank you
but
so,
yeah,
so
thank you.
much.
Good job. And that's all I got. Praise.
Thank you. That means so much. Coming from another adopted mom,
Yeah.
that's the highest praise. So thank you very much.
Yeah. And I knew Kirsten on one of our other calls had mentioned that she was looking for adoption stories and she was an adoptive mom. And so yeah, this was perfect. I've read a couple other of your books. I have All That
Oh
Really
yeah.
Matters here.
Mhm.
That's a great one. I think that was my first dabble in Nicole Deese. And then The Words We
Oh,
Find.
oh,
I
the
know
first one. Yeah.
this is like, is it book three of that
Yeah.
series?
Mhm.
Like I started
That's
in
the
book
only one I
three.
haven't read of that series. I read one and two.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
That's my
So I
newest.
actually do.
Yeah.
Is that book on audio yet? Number
Mhm.
three? Okay.
Yeah.
I listen because, as a mom, you're busy.
I
So
listen to.
cleaning and listening works
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah. That's my best way to read right there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
yeah. And I actually have a friend with a deaf daughter. This has deaf representation. I have a couple friends with deaf children. So I'm going to
Wow.
be sharing that with them because I
That's
just really love
awesome.
how you put some like representation of some real issues in there. It's more than just a fluffy story. But there's nothing wrong
Yeah.
with fluffy stories. We need those too. But there's just a depth to your characters and your subject matter that I love so much.
So thank you.
Does, does anyone else have questions or comments for Nicole?
I was just
Jennifer,
gonna
pop
say
in.
I enjoyed it. Today I was finished. I started it yesterday, and I was
Oh
reading it on
wow.
my Kindle, so I finished it. So that's why I was so active in the Fable app today. Was because I was I always have two, three books going at the same time. So I had the Kindle going, I had a regular book going, and then I have an audio book going. So I'm like,
Mhm.
I've got to do this before tonight. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I have never read any of your books before, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. And there was a couple of really teary moments, especially when you're talking about family dynamics and you're
Mm,
especially with her mother, her relationship with her mother, and you know, not really understanding her mother,
mhm.
her mother's point. Her mother
Yeah.
did love her. It's just that our parents, of course, nobody responds in the loving way that you expect them to respond to you. But we are all, God's children and we're, uniquely formed. So,
Yeah. That's
but I
right.
thoroughly enjoyed it. So,
Thank you.
and I'm gonna
Thank
look for more of your work to read too.
you very, very much. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that.
We have any other questions or comments? All right. Well, a couple more questions then. Can you share with us a little about your writing process? I know when you started, you had littles and you were writing, you said during nap time and late at night. Now you've got kids that are older, but that doesn't
I
make it any less
know.
busy.
I know I need to change my bio because I do have two freakishly tall sons, but one of them has already moved out and one of them just graduated and just turned 18 all in the same week. So I
My
know
goodness.
I'm becoming an old mom now. So at least I still have Lucy here. So, there's
Yeah.
that. But yeah, my writing process really has looked it's been very active for a long time. Lots of deadlines and lots of just kind of quick turning over ideas. And so I'm actually currently on a bit of a sabbatical, which has been very refreshing and refilling. It was, I think like I said, I've written 17 books in about 13 years, 14 years. And so, it's kind of a little bit of time for a break, but typically my process looks like this book that I'm working on right now, extremely slowly. So we'll see when that gets done. But it has just kind of looked like, starting with a basic idea. I go once a year with a group of dear friends, who are we all plot. We're all authors, and so we kind of do a plotting retreat together, and we work on each other's books, and we brainstorm, and we record those brainstorms, and then yeah, I go home and write first drafts, and then typically if I'm with a publisher, then it looks like giving that first draft and then getting edits back about 2 to 3 times, and having deadlines each time. But right now, like I said, I'm working on kind of a special project that I'm hoping will be out around Christmas time. And it's just on my own time. So I don't have the pressure of a deadline, which I'm realizing maybe helped me work a little faster, in the previous,
Yeah,
seasons of writing. But yeah, it's been a nice break though, just to take the time for my family and my kids. And you only get to live this season one time, and
for
so
sure.
it's an important season. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you give us a teaser about this book that you're writing, or is it top secret?
I mean, I'm accountable to myself on this, so that's the only thing. But it has to do with Christmas time, and it has to do with kind of getting iced in, with not only another single person, but an entire family. So that's kind of my
Okay.
little teaser, and it's actually inspired by a real story that I read. A news article from a few years ago, and it's just kind of been ticking through in my head, and it's been really fun to write. So yeah, it'll be a little bit of a shorter novel, but not a novella.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're choosing to go indie this time. What made that decision for you?
I just wanted to write on my own time.
Yeah, no
That's really what
deadlines.
it is. I just wanted to be able to have, I've taken like the last 3 months and just, had fun and been with my kids and gone on trips and,
Yeah,
been a wife, and it's been nice to just take a little bit of a breather. So
yeah, yeah. I love that. Well, we will definitely watch for that to come out at the end of the
yeah,
year. That'll be
yeah.
exciting.
Let's hope you and me both. So
Well, you're accountable to all of us
I
now.
know. I know. Now I've said it out loud. So yeah.
We will hold you to your deadline. How about that?
Okay.
Um, let's see. Are there any particular authors or books who have influenced your writing style or your career?
I think one of my all-time favorite, and she's not a Christian author per se, but I would say that she's an inspirational general market author. But I love Amy Harmon. I love Amy Harmon's books. She's a deeply emotional writer, and I think has a really good has really good insight on how to stir, like, the affection of your heart, the affection of a reader's heart. She writes very in-depth characters. Of course, there's humor and there's fun and there's romance, but there's always this deeper storyline, whether she's writing in historical or contemporary. And I think that I have always admired that. Like, I've deeply admired that. She's probably one of my very favorite authors. And like I said, she's general market, but she's not explicit in any way. She's pretty clean, overall. And some of her books are absolutely squeaky clean, and some of them are, borderline. But yeah, so I think her. I also have loved T.I. Lowe, Tanya Lowe. I love Under the Magnolias is one of my favorite stories. Again, kind of that same idea of just this deeper spiritual meaning. And it's interesting because her book, even though she is a Christian and she writes Christian fiction, that book really could be given to any person. There's not, and that's really what I aim for as well. So I loved, like Kirsten said, like, is I want to be able to hand this to, or a friend to hand it to an unbeliever, and it not feel like, there's this hidden agenda behind,
Yeah,
but instead, like, hey, this is a good story. There's an organic faith journey that feels true to these characters and isn't, coming off the page and demanding, for a response, but just like, oh, like this feels so true to the situation,
Yeah.
or this is an interesting viewpoint that this character has, because of this character's faith or whatever it is. And so, yeah.
Before I even knew that there was a category called Christian fiction, I was reading these books and I was just saying, I just wish there were characters like me, just like regular people who their faith guides them. And
Right.
it doesn't have to be a pastor or a pastor's wife or, a missionary or, anything like that. Just regular people like
Yeah.
me. That's
Regular
what,
person. Yeah.
yeah, those are the books
Yeah.
I love. Well, awesome. Well, I want to remind everybody to
Good.
make sure to read, since you have read it, to review it on Amazon,
Yeah.
because those reviews are so helpful to authors. And if you're on Goodreads, you can review it there as well. And it looks like Nicole is frozen. Oh, there she is. You're frozen
Oh,
for a minute. I was like, oh, did we lose her?
sorry.
Yeah, so I was just reminding everybody to make sure to review the book on Amazon because those reviews help authors so much. And we just want to
Yes,
thank you so much for being here, Nicole. We appreciate
absolutely.
your writing and your heart and how God has led you on kind of this mission to be an author, but also the mission to adopt. And we're grateful for you sharing your personal story as well. So thanks for being here. And did we lose her again?
Oh, I see her.
I see her,
Oh,
but
I see where you say she did
yeah,
freeze. Yep.
she's
That was
frozen.
a great look.
All right.